Hey everyone, welcome back to KC3D Sparks. Today we're going to be creating some cages for our kind of like cultist dungeon that we're going for here. So last week we made these bookshelves. I kind of wanted to jump over to this room, like it's some sort of holding area for our sacrificial room. So if we go ahead and build some cages that's kind of like a little bit larger, that way you can manipulate it into any size that you want later on for whatever creatures that this cultist group decides to hold for their sacrifices. So first thing you want to do is make sure that your scenes tab, you're working in the unit you would prefer to work in. For me, I'll be working in inches, and I changed the scale of my grid floor to 1/4 of an inch. To start, I'm going to go ahead and hop over to this layer. For you guys, you can just hop over to your next empty layer. I'm going to do Shift A, Mesh, and Cube. I'm going to change that to Cage. And our default cube is set to 6 inches, which is definitely a little large. Like if we happen to pop that over to our dungeon, which I'm not going to do, I'm just going to leave it there. But our walls are 2 inches wide and, you know, just a little over 2 inches tall. So we definitely don't want our cages to be taller than our dungeon. So we'll go ahead and just size this down manually because I don't have a precise like size that I'm going for. I just kind of want to do a default start and then size it how I want for, like I said, whatever creature you guys are doing. So I'm going to do kind of like maybe 1 3/4 inches, I think would be a good start. And then you could always increase it a little bit or decrease it a lot, whatever you prefer. But I think that's a good starting point for us. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tab into edit mode. I'm gonna go down here, switch to face select, and I'm just gonna go ahead and delete by hitting X the face, because I want my bottom to be hollow. That way I could just drop it over an actual miniature. You guys, of course, could leave this solid if you prefer it that way. That way it's just like, you know, an always empty cage, but I'm gonna have mine hollow. So to start, we're gonna go ahead and add in some loops. So I'm gonna do Control R and do scroll up, so that way I have 3 loops here. And of course you could do more if you wanted the holes in your cages to be small, but I'm gonna do 3 loops, and just don't forget to do it to the other direction as well. And then we can do it horizontally. Perfect, so that will go all the way around. Now there's 2 different ways we can add in the holes of our cages. If you want to be super precise, you can go about it this first way, which is a little bit more tedious, and I'm probably not going to do it this way, but I'll show you how to do it in case if you want to. So go ahead, you'll right click your first face, hit E to extrude, and then just right click out of it. Right click, E to extrude to each one. And you'll want to do this on every side. So it doesn't take that long, so maybe I will do it this way. But after you get all of your extrusions, so let's pretend I did it to all the sides, you'll go ahead and switch this pivot point down here to individual origins, and you'll have to right click. You can't hit A to select everything, or else you will select everything and you won't be able to size it properly. But after you get your extrusion faces selected, go ahead and just hit S to size that down, and all of your holes will be exact, and that'll be very precise. You could certainly do it this way, or if you've seen my videos before, typically we'll just go ahead and add more loops. So we'll do Control R, scroll up, so you hit 2SX. Oh, except you have to change this back to medium point, so SX, and do it to about right there, Control R. And the reason this way is easier is because it does it to every direction. And yes, it is less precise, so you might not want to do it this way if you want your square holes to be exact. But I'm just going to do it this way since it's a little bit faster. But you also want to pay attention because these bars will be much thicker than the edges. So I'm going to grab those 2 loops, do S and X, and just thicken those up to match kind of this width. So probably do about there. Don't forget to do horizontal, so SZ. And you'll want to go till these look about square. Control R, SZ. SZ. And don't forget to do it the other direction as well. So I'm going to hit 3, SY. Get our squares. Just like that. And then I do want to grab these, do S and Y. Whoops. S and Y, size that in, get our thickness up slightly, and I forgot to do it to the top and bottom as well. S and Y, oops, I'm sorry, S and Z. And we'll do that until this looks more square. Okay, so obviously to delete, or the next step would be to delete to create our holes. So just grab these center squares here across each plane. That way it looks like a nice orange Rubik's Cube with just the one color. Grabbing these. Make sure you have all the sides, which we do, so we can just hit X and faces. Perfect, so that becomes nice and hollowed out. But you'll notice that the mesh itself is not going to be printable because this is way too thin. It's just one mesh, it's not solid. It's hollow right now. We need to solidify this. So you're probably thinking, oh, just select everything and hit E to extrude. You could, but that'd be really messy and hard to clean up. My recommendation is hop over here to the modifier tab and you're going to add a solidify modifier, and right away you'll notice the inside lightened up. The normals are right because there's actually a little tiny bit of thickness going on. Right now the thickness is very small, so just to show you guys a little bit easier, I'm going to pop this up to 1/2 inch. So obviously this is way too high. You can see it's overlapping and it's not working right, but this is just to show you guys. You can see here how it thickened from the actual mesh. Perfect. So I'm going to actually do 0.15, and that is a good thickness to start with. So as long as you don't size this way down to be like, I don't know, the size of your pinky nail or something, this will be a good thickness. So as long as it's, you know, between maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch. This should be still a good thickness, but you could always thicken it up later if you needed to, if you were doing very small cages. But this should be good for now. So I'm gonna go ahead with this. We're going to duplicate it because to add in details and stuff, you'll want to go ahead and apply your Solidify modifier, because if you added, like, let's say rivets or something, the Solidify modifier would dimple that in on the inside to match the concave rivet. So concave, I think so. Anyway, so you'll probably want to add this in if you wanted the inside to remain flat. Next thing you want to do is, you know, maybe you'll want to inspect and fix some of these corners. So instead of doing that to the whole thing and trying to make everything match, one easier way to do that would be to tab into edit mode. I'm going to switch to vertex select mode. Make sure everything's deselected. Go into wireframe view, border select these, do X, delete the vertices, and do the same here. X, delete the vertices, add modifier mirror, and we're gonna do X and Y to get that. And for me, I think what I'm gonna do, oh, and make sure clipping is applied as well. I'm just gonna grab this, pull that down to make that level, and that straight, and then go into side view, grab this one, and make that level as well, or at least as close as I can get. All right, so just like that. And of course, Do what you will for that one, but as soon as you're done, you can just go ahead and apply your mirror modifier, because the next part I want to show you won't typically work with the mirror modifier. So let's say you wanted to add an actual door, which I would assume you do. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and hide all of these. So I'm going to border select this and just hit H to hide it. So that way we can focus on just this to add our door. So what I'm going to do is grab these center ones here, do X and delete those vertices. And then what I want to do, grab this so we can add another layer of thickness. So I'm going to hit E to extrude, just size along the X axis first, right about there. And then I'll go ahead and hit B for border select again so I can deselect those and drag these down. Perfect. So that way it adds kind of like our door frame. To add our bars back, all we have to do is grab those, do space and start typing in bridge, and you'll see bridge edge loops right here, and that will add that in for us. So we can do that. Once you have it typed in, all you have to do is hit spacebar and enter, because it will remember what you typed in last time. Whoops. Spacebar, bridge edge loops. So obviously we want our vertical ones as well, so I'm going to do Control R, add 3 loops, 3 loops, and 3 loops. Go ahead, select these, do S and X, and size those in until it looks like it kind of lines up. But then what you can do to make sure it is precise is you'll want to grab one side at a time and do SX0, deselect, and grab one again, do SX0 to make sure it is precise. And then you can do the same thing. So that spacebar bridge, grab these, spacebar bridge, and those spacebar bridge. Whoops, there we go. So now we have our extra thick door. I wanted to add a plate though. So if we go ahead, I'm going to switch to face select and grab these faces in here. Do X, delete the faces. And then I'm going to grab 1, 2, 3, 4, hit F to face that off. I'm going to go to the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, face to face that off as well. And actually also I think I want to do a little bit extra for the door frame, make it stick out just a little bit so that way it's a little bit more evident that it's there. So I'm going to grab the actual frame itself, go into side view, hit E to extrude, and just pop that out a little bit. So that way our door is just a little bit more obvious. For the lock, I already made this plate so that way it kind of looks like, you know, they can't reach it as easily. I'm going to hit E to extrude and just size that down, maybe about there, and I might push it over to the right a little bit, and then I think that's a good size. So let's do E to extrude, pop that out to match, or you could do a little bit less, whatever your preference, but I'm probably going to do right about even. And then we can do E to extrude again, size that down just like that. We're going to do Control R, do 1 loop horizontally, Control R, 1 loop vertically. And what we're going to do with that is switch back to vertex select mode. And we're going to grab these 2, size that way in, grab this and these, do S and X, size those in. But these 2 we're going to draw down. And maybe size them in a little bit more. And with that, we can grab these, E to extrude, and pull that back as far as you want. So it kind of looks like we have a little keyhole. Yes, it's going to probably be much larger than the average keyhole, but it needs to be, you know, a little dramatic for us. So now that we have everything kind of as we would want, I'm gonna go ahead and hit Alt H to unhide the rest of our cage, and we can add in a little bit detail. So let's say you wanted to add some spikes onto the cage. What I like to use is the poke tool to create spikes. Now let's say you wanted a spike right here. Now obviously I'm probably going to want one on each of the intersections, but I'm just going to do this one as an example so you guys can see what I do. So after you grab your selection, you would hit Alt P and then you would hit F6, and you can drag this up to be as dramatic as you want. But you'll notice that it made a cluster of them. That's because the poke tool will do it per face. So I don't want that. I want this to be an actual one spike deal here. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to grab this vertice and do X dissolve vertice, and that will get rid of that for us. So I'll have to grab that whole face there, do Alt P, and that will pop that back up, and it re-added our vertice in for us, so we don't have to worry about the mesh becoming kind of weird. So it is pretty rectangular. You could always go in and manipulate it to be a little bit more round. So you could do those, do S to create it more of that round spike if you're interested. Okay, so what we'll have to do is, if you want spikes all along, you'll just have to go through, grab your vertices, and if you did want them on the edges, you would still treat it normally and grab that center vertice to delete. So let's grab those, grab that corner one, all of these ones here, X dissolve vertices, and you'll notice with the edges it gets really funky looking, but don't worry about it. It kind of almost looks like it got deleted, but they just got dissolved, so it doesn't really know how to react. So don't worry too much, but you will want to switch to face select mode so nothing extra gets selected. And we can go ahead and select our faces. And you'll notice whenever we hit Alt P from now on, it saves our size. So if you ever added additional spikes later on, you don't have to memorize the dimension that you did the other spikes, which I find really handy, because sometimes I definitely miss a spot. I'm like, dang it, now I have to redo everything, but luckily you don't. You can just simply hit Alt P and it saves the dimension from before, which, okay, that looks pretty cool, not gonna lie. So if you wanted just the top, you could certainly do that, but if you want to do every direction, you could certainly do that as well, which I'm gonna go ahead and do, and I'll see you guys in a second. So now that we have our beautiful spiked cage created, let's say you didn't want spikes. So I'm gonna go ahead and do Shift D just to duplicate that. So if you didn't want spikes, you'll still probably want to follow this process, because to add rivets, you would still want to go ahead and just go add a subdivision surface modifier, crank that up a couple times, and probably want to edit your spikes to be a little bit smaller so that way they round out a little bit easier. So what we'll do is we will have to sharpen the cage itself back up, but we'll want to deselect our rivets. So grab these, go to vertex select, wireframe, deselect those. And any other points. Shift E to be just like that. And to actually make them look more like rivets, like I said, we will want to shrink the points down. So you'll have to grab every point. You could either just size it manually to see where you would want it. Let's say you wanted to do it that way. You could just grab these. Go into side view, pop them down, and then you could go from there. So once you're in the actual spike point, when you're actually doing the Alt P, you'll probably just want to make them less, that we don't have to resize. So we would probably just X, delete this, go back to our other cage, go back in, and size these down. But that's up to you. For me, I like the spiked cage. I don't know about you, but I think this one looks a lot cooler and a little bit scarier for our cultist dungeon. But for the rivets, you'll want to go ahead, just do the subdivision surface modifier and you'll be fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and move this to our front layer and make sure we still like the size. So I'm gonna move this over, focus in on it, move it up to be above the floor. And right now it's definitely pretty large, but I'm kind of happy with that. Like if we brought this statue over, which I know is taller than most of the NPCs, so it definitely pokes through, but he's on a pedestal. So if we pretend he wasn't on that, that would probably work pretty well. We could make this a little bit taller to accommodate that, just like that. So if you did want this to hold people, you could certainly do that. Or if you wanted it to hold animals, whatever, you can do it just like that. So just size it however you want it. And pull him back over here. Be back where he was. And I'm gonna push this cage here, do Shift D. Shift D for our cages. And maybe do, no, it's fine. So we could start lining those up around the walls. Of course, you could give them more space if you didn't want them so close together, maybe like that. Go into top view, Shift D, pull them over here, and then rotate 180 degrees. So that way we will have the doors on the right side. Cool. So if you guys have any questions or requests or anything like that, make sure you leave those in the comments below, but make sure you do like and subscribe so that way I know you guys are liking the series. If there's anything specific you'd like to see in this dungeon, by all means, let me know. I can always add more rooms, things like that. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you guys next week.